A very good morning and Jai Hind to everyone present here and those who have joined us online. My name is Colonel Deepak Kumar and I take this opportunity on behalf of the Director General to welcome all of you to the panel discussion on the topic of civil military fusion in India. As put out in the brief concept note, which was circulated to all of you, and in our common understanding, civil military fusion means uniting the civil and the military resources in order to bring out a very high level of technological competence. The civil and the military have joined hands in the past. During the World War II, civil factories in the United States, Germany, and Japan were tasked to produce goods for the military. But is this what we really call civil military fusion? Or there is more to it? To discuss the topic, we have amidst us a very distinguished panel, and it's my proud privilege to formally introduce them. Not that they need any introduction. Our main speaker is Lieutenant General Raj Shukla, Param Vishis Seva Medal, Yudh Seva Medal, and Sena Medal. The general has had a very distinguished career in the Indian Army. He was commissioned into the Regiment of Artillery and is a combat helicopter pilot. Among his notable command assignments are the command of his regiment, that of an infantry brigade in CI operations, a division in the line of control, a corps, and the Commander-in-Chief of the Indian Army Training Command. The General is a former Commandant of the Army War College and has been a research fellow at the IDSA and a visiting fellow at CLOS. Welcome back, sir, to MP-IDSA. Ladies and gentlemen, we are also honored to have three very distinguished guests as discussants. It's my proud privilege to first introduce Shri Sanjay Mitra. Shri Sanjay Mitra is an IAS officer from the West Bengal cadre. He was the Chief Secretary of West Bengal. His other important appointments have been that of a collector and district magistrate of the North 24 Pargana district, Joint Secretary in the Prime Minister's office, Secretary Road Transport and Highways, and the Defense Secretary of India. As the Defense Secretary, Shri Mitra was instrumental in introducing and guiding several path-breaking initiatives. An alumnus of the prestigious John F. Kennedy School of Government, Harvard University, Shri Mitra had served a tenure as a consultant to the United Nations Development Program. Due to certain unforeseen circumstances, Shri Mitra, who was to join us here, will now be joining us in a virtual mode. We are honored by your presence, sir. Thank you very much. Our second discussant is Lieutenant General C.P. Mohanty, Param Vishis Seva Medal, Ati Vishis Seva Medal, Sena Medal, Vishis Seva Medal. General Mohanty was commissioned into the Rajput Regiment and was the 42nd Vice Chief of the Indian Army. His notable command assignments have been the command of his battalion in J&K and the Northeast, commands of a mountain brigade, and then a multinational brigade in Congo, command of a mountain division, command of a corps in Eastern Command, command of Uttar Bharat area, and commander-in-chief of the Indian Army Southern Command. The general has served a tenure as the military advisor in Seychelles. Sir, a warm welcome to you at MP-IDSA. Last but certainly not the least, we have amidst us Air Vice Marshal Anil Golani. Air Marshal Golani is a fighter pilot, a qualified flying instructor, and an examiner. He is an alumni of the Royal College of Defence Studies, England. Among his notable appointments are the ones of the Air Force Component Commander in Andaman Nicobar Command, Air Officer commanding Maritime Air Operations in Mumbai, Chief Instructor in Defense Services Staff College, and a tenure in Strategic Forces Command. Air Marshal Golani is currently the Additional Director General of Center for Air Power Studies. Welcome, sir, to MP-IDSA. With these few words, I now request the Director General, Ambassador Sujan R, Indian Foreign Service, to kindly deliver his opening remarks and navigate the discussions. The Director General, please.
Thank you, Colonel Deepak Kumar. Very good morning to all of you. And thank you all for joining us today for our event on a very pertinent topic, civil-military fusion in India. Lieutenant General Raj Shukla is our keynote speaker, and I'm sure you actually feel it's some kind of a homecoming for you as well, because you're coming back to the IDSA where you spent time at the rank of colonel. And we have many other, officers from the Indian Army, Air Force, and Navy with us currently, and who knows, they will also go on to achieve many other things in life. We also have other eminent persons, as was mentioned, and so I welcome Shri Sanjay Mitra, an old friend of mine. He will, as was mentioned by Colonel Deepak Kumar, join us online. And I also extend a very warm welcome to General CP Mohanty and Air Vice Marshal Golani. Welcome to you as well. Friends, today, in fact, all eyes are riveted on the imminent announcement, I believe, of the Agnipath scheme, which will introduce Agniveers in the Indian Armed Forces. And I believe this is a very big step in regard to civil-military fusion as well. I just hope that we all keep an open mind with regard to change. Generally speaking, it's difficult to accept change, no matter what kind of change. And there will always be that abhorrence of change. But then we must move with the times as well. So let us look at that as and when the announcement is made and examine it dispassionately, and especially in the context of today's topic. Friends, civil-military fusion is the convergence of military and civilian systems and resources in order to maximize, in my view, comprehensive national power and its expressions both during peacetime and wartime. Dual-use technologies and collaboration are naturally at the heart of such a confluence. Military R&D has many spin-offs for civil uses, and conversely, many private enterprises have cutting-edge capabilities that can benefit the military. The debate around the civil-military fusion, as it's known, CMF, has gained prominence in recent years, partly because of what we read about China and the initiatives taken under President Xi Jinping. Actually, civil-military fusion in China goes back a very long way to the founding of the Communist Party of China and the PLA. Even before the PRC was established, the CPC and the PLA had set up defense industries in different parts of China, areas that they had liberated, so to speak. And there is therefore a long history of that integration in that country. Post 1949, we have seen how, and especially after the rupture with the Soviet Union, how China focused on civil-military fusion to achieve a high degree of self-reliance in diverse fields, from atomic bombs to space to defense equipment, sometimes also adhering to the principle of beg, buy, borrow, steal, but getting there. The introduction of the market economy in China saw the excess capacities of defense factories being used in the early stages to produce consumer goods. Sometimes factories that made defense equipment were asked to make plastic buckets, for instance, for the market economy. But they took things too far as well when the PLA, in a whole-time manner, began to indulge in non-soldiering activities like running tourism companies, running resorts, running sort of five-star hotels and golf clubs. And it was, I recall, President Chiang Samin who cracked down heavily on the PLA around 1997 with his ordinance banning such activity and asking the PLA to focus entirely on its core competence, soldiering, the while, of course, assuring them of adequate funding, for that is something that is also required. The PLA was engaging in these activities because they wanted to make extra money for their modernization. And the moral of the story here is that governments, therefore, must find the funds, adequate resources to ensure that civil military fusion takes place in the correct perspective and not necessarily at variance with national objectives. Civil military fusion in China was facilitated also by the fact that for a very long time, the party elders, those that ran the People's Republic of China, and especially up to the Deng Xiaoping era, were actually men who had been long marchers. They had been part of the PLA. They had participated in various campaigns, and they were seriously heroes of the revolution in China. The PLA generals had a place in the highest decision-making echelons of the Communist Party of China, especially the Central Committee, the Politburo Standing Committee. But I must tell you that over the last 2 decades or more, their representation in the Politburo and the Politburo Standing Committee has come down considerably, though they continue to maintain a very big presence, understandably, in the Central Military Commission. As such, I believe that all authoritarian states have a clear advantage in implementing civil military fusion. So what we say about China is equally true, was equally true of the Soviet Union, for instance. And theirs is more of a military civil fusion. That is to say, authoritarian states have more of a military civil fusion rather than the other way around, with the tasking led by the organs of state security and the military. Countries like China adopt an all of government and all of people approach to scientific and technological development. For instance, China is widely known to use its academics, scientists, students, and entrepreneurs to gain knowledge and intelligence from open sources as well as during foreign visits for strategic ends. Chinese espionage, for instance, is known to use what is best described by experts as sea lamprey tactics, exploitative, to say the least. A strong civil military fusion has been observed throughout the annals of history. In fact, colonialism rests on this foundation, in my view. The British East India Company and the Crown worked together seamlessly to colonize India. The president of the board of control in the company simply gave way to the Secretary of State for India after the annexation of India through the Government of India Act of 1858. During World War II, the United States ensured that the civilian population would channelize all the resources in assisting the military. This boosted the US military industrial complex, and we are all aware of the contributions of DARPA to not only the US military, but also the US industry. Today, the challenge of achieving civil-military fusion is growing. Dual-use technologies are proliferating. Niche and potentially revolutionary technologies like artificial intelligence, robotics, drones, and cyber, just to name a few, are changing the very nature of the discourse. States with authoritarian structures, or those like the US with a history of civil-military fusion, and even those like Israel, which face existential threats, have taken the lead. And others like Iran and North Korea, under sanctions or at the margins of global supply chains, have also evolved their own systems, and one would say quite successfully. Amidst all this, where does India stand? Our debates today center around jointness in the three services, as well as the need for inclusion of the military in the higher decision-making structures of the government. Beyond this, there is a crying need, in my view, to throw open hitherto protected areas such as defense manufacturing, space, cyber, etc., even more to the private sector, which has enormous talent and resources. The government of India has taken many steps, but much more needs to be done. And this in particular should be done by integrating R&D across the country, especially in universities, the Indian Institutes of Technology. These should be integrated with the commercialization of technologies with backup from institutions like the DRDO and the DPSUs. Even more important, in my view, is the circulation of human resources between civilian and military departments, private industry and academia, which is woefully inadequate in India. So there is not much point in trying to create civil-military fusion through policies if you do not have the human resources structures in place to effectively implement such fusion. I believe that a revolving door, as practiced in the US, would be of great advantage. In my view, all this will help make in India and the Atmanirbhar Bharat in defense more successful. Budgetary constraints point us in the direction of indigenization of military equipment. This is inevitable. The government of India's decision in February this year to earmark a full 25% of the annual R&D budget for private entities will boost the development of cutting-edge military technologies. India, at the end of the day, will have to evolve its own unique model of civil-military fusion, given its historical experience, circumstances, and resources. I'm sure that General Raj Shukla and the distinguished panel will discuss these issues in greater detail today, and I'm sure that you're eagerly waiting to listen to them. As chair, I now promise to be seen more than heard. We look forward to their views, and a very big thank you from me to all of you that are gathered here today. Thank you. I now request General Raj Shukla to kindly deliver his keynote address. Thank you.
All right, the Director General, Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis, Shri Sujan Chinoy, members of the Executive Council of IDSA, fellow panelists, discussants, Shri Sanjay Mitra, former Defense Secretary, whom I'm told is online, General Mohanty, a very valued colleague and former Vice Chief of the Army Staff, this very distinguished audience, the IDSA fraternity, colleagues past and present, those from the armed forces and those from the IDSA. As the DG said, I spent a very interesting and eventful year here at the IDSA in 2009-10. With me was, I still recall, Harinder, who went on to become Corps Commander in Ladakh and is now Commandant IMA, and Arvind Datta, who we commanded divisions together in the valley, and he retired as the Adjutant General. So the IDSA is a very good omen for military careers. Colleagues past and present, friends, ladies and gentlemen. May I begin thanking the DG, Shri Chinoy, for the invite and the opportunity, as also the DDG, Major General Bipin Bakshi and Colonel Rajesh Kumar, for all the help and for putting this event together. I'm indeed honored and excited to be speaking this morning. My extreme gratitude to those of you who have taken the trouble to be present here physically and to those that have chosen to join online. I structured my talk on civil-military fusion in 4 parts. And as is obvious, I shall begin by placing the salience of the subject in context. The DG has laid the foundation. I'll just elaborate on it. What is civil-military fusion and why, in my humble view, is it so significant? I shall then highlight certain trends in fusion in some countries of note, the broad contours of the fusion narrative across political systems. It's not confined to China, but to other democracies as well. There's also best practices in the domain. And I would like to make this point here that it is not to ape these systems. It's not to say if these are indeed the trends which are best in terms of global practices, how can we adapt them to the unique Indian genius and the Indian terrain? Because unless that adaptation occurs, success will not flow. We shall then move on to carry out an audit of the state of civil-military fusion in India. I think we've taken some very significant steps. May I make this point that Atmanirbharta is not about self-reliance, it is about civil-military fusion. If this fusion doesn't happen, Atmanirbharta will just simply peter out. It will not take off. So where does India stand? What has been done and why we simply need to take it to the next higher level? I'll try and highlight with some examples and some facts and some statistics. And finally, as I said, why we need to do far more by way of fusing civil military capacities. If we are to deal with the accumulating strategic adversity around us, and may I say that is grave, see what's happening around the WTC, the Western Horizons, again, great threats, and in the IOR. We simply, in my view, cannot match up to the challenge unless we fuse capacities. And I'm open to any kinds of discussions on this. And also, even if these threats were not there, the humongous change that is sweeping the national security landscape, unless you fuse, you will simply lag behind that change. So those are my two principal arguments, and I'll try and lace them with examples. So as I said, civil military fusion will be a key metric in our ability to square up to both the challenges, and that is the reason why we simply must accelerate. Now, let me begin by placing the subject in context because it is somewhat of an evolutionary tale, and it begins here in IDSA in 2009-10, in precise, when I was doing a fellowship here in these very precincts of the IDSA, I think Delhi's foremost think tank, and the subject of study was civil-military relations. That was my subject of study. And I still recall the personas of Shri Naren Sisodia, the then DG, Shri Thomas Matthews, the DDG, Dr. Arvind Gupta, who's now chair of the, he's the head of the VIF, who chaired some very torrid but enjoyable debates on the subject. And let me say to their credit that they did allow some very diverse views on the subjects to be articulated. I recall one panel here where we had Admiral Arun Prakash, General Malik, Mr. Naresh Chandra. But these debates in hindsight, as I look back, were largely centered around why civilian control of the military was so necessary. In fact, it was argued that it was the essential peg for the court of democracy to hang on. Of course, as it turned out, that was a no-brainer. Political control of the military is indeed a sine qua non in terms of democratic postulates, political control. As Peter Fever, a commentator on CMR and a theorist, puts it well, he says, regardless of how superior the military view of a situation may be, the civilian view trumps it. In other words, the civilian is right even when he's wrong. The civilian has a right to be wrong. This is what his assertion is. The militaries have little choice but to salute and obey. Of course, there are a lot of nuances to this, but I'm trying to set at rest this fundamental fear that in a democracy, who has the final say? There's no doubt it is the political leadership. And that is the accepted norm in most democracies. On another occasion, I recall the iconic Shri K. Subramaniam arguing very cogently, and it was extremely far-sighted. He said then how the institution of the CDS would never become this very powerful entity that some feared would challenge the democratic frame, but the creation of the institution would in fact strengthen civil military control. Strengthen civil military control. I thought it was a very insightful observation, and it should have set, it did not, but it should have set to rest all the, shall I say, fears regarding the setting up the institution. And this is 2009-10, years before it was finally set up. So there were several other nuances in the back and forth that followed, but the debate essentially was one of stovepipes, of silos, of control, the overall tenor being one of a certain tension between the civil and military domains. There was little focus on strategic productivity or outcomes. So a whole lot of time was spent on debating the warrant of precedence, who would sit where, in what row, who would or should receive whom. General S.K. Sinha, who somebody I admire a lot, and I think much of the army admires him, in one of his books, he devotes 2 to 2.5 pages. He recounts the incident of when he's an AG and the defense secretary is to come, and he's thinking in his mind whether he should go down to receive him or not. I mean, somebody of his erudition chose in his book to spend 2 pages on whether he should receive the defense secretary or he should not. I mean, the point I'm trying to make is that this is what the debates in India then were steered in. You had this question coming up, is the defense secretary responsible for the defense of India? So the service chiefs are consigned to insignificance. Even if it is so stated in the rules of business in terms of wordplay, how is it so relevant in the real world? The defense of India is a very weighty matter. It concerns us all. It is a responsibility of a wide range of functionaries and institutions. How can the entire burden fall on the shoulders of the poor defense secretary alone? The great importance of the position notwithstanding. The point I make is that one saw a lot of technical quibbling of this kind, and you find it reasserting itself now. Should the CDS be Secretary DMA? I mean, CDS is CDS, but if he's Secretary DMA, it empowers him greatly. But these were the debates in articles, debates and opinion pieces of the Times. So we talked civil military, but in kind of stagnant, wasteful ways. Perhaps because the state of CMR in India was a little infantile and had not yet moved into adulthood. Symbolized also perhaps by our larger attitudes, predilections towards the instrument of force and the levers of business and entrepreneurship, which are actually the central drivers of wealth creation as exemplified by these two examples. Now, I make these to give these two examples, not to make any political point, but just to tell you, I mean, it symbolizes the thinking of those times. So Fareed Zakaria in the postmodern world tells us about Prime Minister Nehru turning furious merely at the sight of uniformed officers in the defense ministry. So Fareed, who's been schooled in the American tradition, wonders if the defense officers will not be there in the Ministry of Defense, where they will be. But it was a part of coup-proofing in those times. But when you look back, it was extremely retrograde because they were most sophisticated tools of civilian control available. And the symbolism of this kind pushed the very valuable instrument of force to the periphery of our strategic outlook. Now, that was the unfortunate consequence. Now, look at these centers of wealth creation, business, entrepreneurship, which are also central to capacity building in any modern democracy. So, Mr. G. Piramal in the book Business Legends tells us how, in a conversation between J.R.D. Tata and Nehru, when Mr. Tata is trying to argue that the public sector needs to become professional, efficient, productive, and therefore make profits, Nehru turns around and tells him that never talk to me about the word profit. It's a dirty word. Now, if you do not make profits, how do businesses survive? Profits contribute to the larger ecosystem of wealth creation. Such attitudes kill the spirit of enterprise and they extinguish entrepreneurial zeal. But they were the prevailing maxims of those times. And so even as we were debating CMR, and why I give you these examples is because I will return to these examples when I talk of evolution of CMR in India. But the point is that even as we were debating CMR in the manner that I just recounted, the corresponding conversation in many other countries of consequences was trending in an altogether different direction towards productivity, delivery, in terms of ambitious strategic military outcomes. There was this one question asked, for instance, why build walls of granite between these cylinders of excellence? So if the civil and military domains are cylinders of excellence, why build these walls of granite? And the wisdom was that get the civil military domains together in a productive embrace. Another commentator whose name I do not quite recall, I was trying to search through the last week, but I couldn't get his name, put it even more thoughtfully, and I quote, and do listen to this, especially the younger officers from the armed forces. Vital issues of statecraft and national security are determined by the pattern of institutional interaction between the civil and military components of a nation's polity. The ordering of civil-military relations, therefore, lies at the heart of a nation's security framework. And now this piece, while being rooted in the firm and unambiguous political control of the military, a robust and vibrant relationship produces a polity that is alive to the nuances of national security and wise to the uses of military power. Wise to the uses of military power. Now, this was, in my view, as I look back now, a metric that was absent. The wisdom of using military power simply did not exist. Now, what is this military power? It is not an instrument that jackboots around the world, but one that is joint, calibrated, optimized to win future fights, razor sharp, technologically enabled, and ready. Now, each word of each of these aspirational descriptors is one word, but it takes decades to create. So if you want to get a joint force, we've seen the problem. Why decades? Maybe a lifetime. Calibrated, ready. Look at the Russian military. This very large gargantuan army. People said it was the army of the 21st century. It proved to be hugely unready. But if the polity, the civil military polity, is wise to the users of military power and alive to the nuances of national security, see the huge challenge before you. You have simply no option but to fuse thinking, design, execution to create these capacities. So the debate in CMR globally began to move from control to productive engagement, so to vibrant, productive cross flows between various institutions in the two domains. The modern persuasion, and I think the DG defined it very well, the modern persuasion, the current initiatives in the civil military domain have since moved even further and are now targeted at the bringing together of attributes and talents from diverse domains in the resolute pursuit of national security interests. And when I say national security, I don't refer to it narrowly in terms of defense, but not military, but in terms of defense. So a wide angle view of national security. And this line of thinking has given birth to the coinage civil military fusion, military civil fusion. It's referred to in various forms, but the larger drivers are the same. So civil military fusion, we could acronym it as CMF, is about yet another transition. So from control to vibrant, robust engagement, and now to complete fusion. And when you fuse, it is also about taking the interface to a qualitative high. It's also about quality. It's not about fusion alone. So CMF is not only about aggregation, but qualitative aggregation as well. May I also say that integration is not a one-trick pony. Theater commands, critical though they are, and I'm a big votary of theater commands, are but a minor step in this long journey. The ultimate destination is civil military fusion of talents, of attributes, of skill sets, and therefore operational and strategic outcomes, all designed to facilitate the national interest. And how do you do it? You have no choice but to collapse all silos, civil and military, and the breaking of institutional turfs, because that is never easy, but it just has to be done. It has been done in many smart ways in other countries. Why can't we do it in India? If India can make a vaccine in 12 months, a vaccine of global quality, and by the way, the Chinese whom we keep quoting, and I'm also going to quote them greatly, haven't been able to do it. So we are capable of great stuff if we can do this. The bringing together of all talents and attributes, civil servants, centers of research and development, domain experts, the scientific community, academia, technologists, business, entrepreneurs. Who's the latest star in Spacecom in the US? Elon Musk. It's no longer NASA. It's no longer Lockheed. See where civil military fusion has traveled there. So entrepreneurs, startups, business, dreamers, and the armed forces in pursuit of capacity building, and by the same logic of larger national security objectives. So civil military fusion is not collaboration, it is not merely coordination, not just jointmanship, much beyond integration, far more than cross-pollination, complete fusion. If I may invoke some cultural imagery, it would perhaps be the fusion of Saraswati, our centers of learning and research, Lakshmi, our centers of business and wealth creation, and Durga, instruments of power, to build capacities and strengthen the sinews of our strategic military posture. Quite the antithesis of the earlier events that I referred to, PM Nehru in MOD, keep the instrument of force out, or stay away from these centers of wealth creation. I mean, I think that they were entirely unwise. The concept is also driven by the humble acknowledgement that the national interest is so valuable and sacred, national security is so complex, sophisticated, and competitive that no single institution or combination of institutions will be able to realize its rather lofty objectives. No single institution on its own. So the armed forces cannot do it. DRDO cannot do it. Centers of business alone, nobody can do it. You simply have to fuse because such is the complexity. Let me just give you an example. And this, I somehow digested this fact only about 3 months back, which, doesn't speak very well, but look at the complexity. I'm told today, if one of the reasons, amongst the others, one of the reasons the Russians have performed poorly is because of their weaknesses in microelectronics. Because that chip enables you in IR and imaging, communications, and everything else. And I was somewhat surprised to learn that to put together a microchip from sand to finished product, this whole process travels through the boundaries of 70 countries. a major semiconductor supplier depends on 1,600 suppliers in terms of supply chains across the globe. Now, if these are the complexities of national security, and we have to fuse globally. You need techno alliances, those kind of things. How can, if we do not come out of our silos, will we be able to achieve any worthwhile objective in national security? That may also be the central message emanating from the pandemic, by the way. If everything is national security, everything and everybody simply must come together. Look at the pandemic. What began as a health crisis metamorphosed into this major national security event. We saw the interdependence of technology and global supply chains playing out, the value of techno alliances, the politics of international vaccine flows. In exchange for Pfizer vaccine supplies to Argentina, I'm told the USA sought sovereign military bases as collateral guarantees. And then we saw the brutal geopolitics flowing out. See what happened in the South China Sea, the East China Sea, in our own case, along the LAC. So what began as a health crisis soon metamorphosed into a national security event. So, this is the reason why if the challenges are so complex, if in terms of challenges there are no divides, in terms of squaring up to the challenges, how can we exist in divides? So that is part one, where I thought I would highlight civil-military fusion. And if I have hopefully established the salience of the term civil-military fusion, let me now turn very briefly to the trends, best practices, which are best illustrated by examples from around the world. So instead of giving you any further theories, here are a few examples for your kind consideration. And they are not anecdotal, but well-researched, authentic examples. After this, if anybody wants, I can give you the source, or I'll give you a personal event where I have seen it. So look at the US Army's Futures Command. Why was it created? The US Army's Futures Command, which actually came out of TREDOC, was created because the Americans realized that they were falling behind in the technological innovation game with China. The DG referred to China. The military academia complex of China is posing a very serious threat to the famed military industrial complex of USA. And why is it so remarkable in the Chinese case is because many of the universities, as we all know, were simply destroyed by Mao's Cultural Revolution. So not only have you got those universities going, but you've got them to collaborate with the military. And huge steps are being taken. And what are the purpose of the US Army Futures Command? You go to its website. When I was DGPP, I traveled to the States where I first met the boss of the US Army Futures Command, and then the ambition was staggering. It describes itself as a public-private partnership. Now, it is blasphemous. The first time I read it, an army command declaring that it is a public-private partnership. And if you ask anybody in army headquarters that if any institution can be public-private, he'll faint. I mean, but that is what people are doing, and it's not out of any courtesy. It is simply, it's not out of any, shall I say, a good-natured move to get private sector in. They've simply been forced to do it, but they declare it. And the inspiration is simple, that when you converge the best from two different cultures, government and private sector, you get a new culture of innovation and delivery. So culture, as they say, it's structure for breakfast. And where do you again find this term public-private partnership? It's one of the pillars of Atmanirbharta. So unless you get public-private partnership going, Atmanirbharta General, Atmanirbharta in defense, it will not happen. And if you want to know, here is the Army's Future Command. And where does it locate? I'm told a huge search was done. 30 cities were in the fray initially. A search panel finally homes on to Austin, Texas. What is Austin, Texas? It is America's global innovation engine. It is also the global innovation engine. It is also the land of Elon Musk. And the Undersecretary of the Army, Ryan McCarthy, said we were looking for a mature entrepreneurial incubator hubs with access to cutting-edge talent. So military capacities cannot be built without cutting-edge talent. They cannot be built without taking innovation to the next high. And this is not merely about procurement. Procurement is passé. This is about innovation. Procurement is merely getting legacy platforms into your system. This is getting future technologies into your system. And so they located there. And they have this vibrant interface with the top-tier university system with proficiencies in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, over 2,000 top quality hires have been carried out by the Army Futures Command over the last 2 years. It's top names in science from Austin, Texas, and universities around. There is ready availability of private sector enterprise, and the main reason is the mature startup ecosystem which is available for innovation. And Ryan McCarthy in that same speech goes on to elaborate that only cutting edge talent will help us get technological innovation, which will give us imaginative solutions for national security as distinct from procurement. So it is central in our, or very critical to our strategic competition with China. Technological innovation is a command function now. It's a command function under a 4-star with a very large chunk of the US DoD's defense R&D budget, which is a whopping $130 billion. So out of that, perhaps the US Army Futures Command boss, a 4-star, has got $100 billion to get the innovation system going. Perhaps ARTRAC should start looking at it. And look at how they have taken it to a new high. To break all this, we had this problem, GSQR and the line direct trade. By the way, the American military openly says now that the GSQR is dead. They're only looking at ways to get around it. And look at this project convergence. It is also a commentary on the DIU. IDEX is modeled on the DIU. The Americans there, I won't say that they are saying that the DIU is failing, but they are wary about its success because the DIU has not delivered very much. So they take this new step, which is the Army Futures Command, where this project convergence, you have these cross-functional teams. So we'll say with a soldier, an academician, a scientist, a technologist, they all travel together to the theater command. In the theater command, they are given an operational briefing. Now, it may not have the operational details, but a briefing generally, say of the Pacific Indo-PACOM. So how does it operate? How does it project power? So to project power, it needs satellites. To break the A2AD umbrella, it needs precision read, it needs long range. So they are given an operational outline of the theater command. And they come back and they imagine what technologies they can fuse into it. And then there is that whole system of soldier feedback, prototype, product, placement of orders. They are trying to bypass the entire Pentagon bureaucracy in terms of delivering the next generation technology. And those of us from the military will realize what a big challenge it is. I mean, to bypass this. As a consequence, they have opened 300 labs, academic partnerships across USA in things like advanced materials, hypersonics, AI. The University of Texas, they have established a George W. Bush Combat Development Center, $130 million. Carnegie Mellon done a R&D hub and signed a contract of $50 billion for advanced algorithms, autonomy, and AI. They have opened a multidisciplinary software factory in Austin, Texas, in the Army Futures Command. And the belief now is, now this is significant, if there is any truth to it, that the replacement to the next Black Hawk, the next Patriot, the next Bradley, the next Abrams, the next Apache will come not from the traditional procurement systems, the primes, but from the Austin ecosystem. So in ambition, it is breathtaking. It is absolutely breathtaking. And because of its success, what was set up as an Army Futures Command is now steadily gaining a tri-service character. So that perhaps is going to be, so the famous American military-industrial complex is undergoing a metamorphosis. The point I tried to make is that civil military fusion, if you just say, I mean, the 3 words tell you in common sense what it means, but it has numerous layers, numerous nuances, and therefore huge challenges. Once you accept that system, or you accept the logic of the system, see the whole distance that you have to travel. So as I said, it was driven by competition from the Chinese military academia complex, which is even more fused and intertwined. It is about exercising new choices, not the traditional choices of procurement, and prioritizing a new ecosystem of talent and innovation, under over traditional primes and even DARPA. In terms of military symbology, do consider this. It may not be entirely accurate, but do consider this. The Ukraine conflict. So you have Russia, a gargantuan army with legacy systems, greatly invested in hardware. Ukraine with a modest military enabled by Western innovation. And who seems to be winning? Look at the legacy systems, the heavy in capital investments. So the tank, the Su-30 and the Moskva. Look at what innovation created. The Javelin, the Stinger and the Neptune, and who seems to be winning. And it's not only about the Javelin missile, but all those technologies within it about precision, location, so on and so forth. Who seems to be winning? And if it is the side with innovation which is winning, it is because there are no silos. And do also remember that the Soviet military in its heyday, they say, atrophied. It was also hugely invested in hardware. In those days, the Soviet army claimed that they would carry out this blitzkrieg across Europe and get to the English Channel in 48 hours. But it atrophied because they didn't have an accompanying Silicon Valley. So that ecosystem of innovation is very important. And once the animal spirits of civil-military fusion get unleashed in the manner that I was trying to suggest, and the juices of entrepreneurial zeal began to flow, the boundaries of possibility are pushed further and further by characters like Elon Musk. Now, Elon Musk is not somebody who was invited by the defense establishment. He pushed his way. But he could do it because they were basic enablers of civil-military fusion. And this story is fascinating. We all remember when we were growing up, space was an exclusive club. It was a club of exclusive countries, 5 to 6. I mean, whenever we asked for a satellite, we were told it's a very complicated business, 2020. Then when 2019 came, they said, no, priority is 2022. The launch itself seemed to be so complicated. Here, Musk is launching almost 60 satellites a week. And look at the way he creates SpaceX. It's the magic of business and science. There's a lovely biography of Musk by Ashley Vance to study it. It's not easy at all. He sees who are the competitors with the US Space Com. So they are these normal industry, the traditional contractors like Lockheed Martin, and there are these new startups which can never match up to Lockheed Martin. He studies them over 3 years and creates this SpaceX, which is actually a hip company with top talent, global teams, best salaries. And what has he done? He has made a country thing a company thing. Today, he's launching satellites for the US Air Force. He's looking at the anti-satellite systems. He is behind the designing of these US Space Force's forays into the Earth, Moon, Mars system. And if that happens, it will, lead to huge leads in the UDA cycle and some game-changing military consequence. See, look at his Starlink terminals. I mean, on one tweet, they get deployed. Just see if it had been G2G, how long would it have taken? They get deployed. And what do? They enable strategic communications between Zelensky and global councils. They enable communications between Zelensky and the street to strengthen resolve, communications between him and his troops for morale. They are also used for target designation. They are designating artillery. And when they become the subject of Russian air attack, he produces 3 to 4 reports to enhance survivability. The point that I'm making is that this kind of innovation, this kind of response cannot come from traditional spaces. So they have to come from places like this. Sheer entrepreneurial zeal. Look at Musk. I mean, he's really you may call it maverick or you may call it entrepreneurial zeal. When he's looking for these rockets, he goes to Lockheed and they quote some high prices. He goes to somebody else, they quote high prices. He flies to Russia to get those rockets. The point, I mean, now Musk may be a rarity, it may be a very different example, but the larger point is that if these animal spirits get unleashed in defense, if civil military talents come together, see the endless possibilities. And now he's blazing new trails in power management. They also will have great combat application. The radar, 6 generators, those long trains which were so easily targeted. If Musk wins these, or if he does well in these trails, or people like Musk do well in these trails in power management, look at the combat consequences. We can have equipment with much smaller signatures, and therefore this whole need to invest also in pure science. The new credo abroad is from equipment to talent acquisition, which means that you get talent which will produce those winning technologies. They will produce these game-changing rocket systems, which means that you need your HR to reform surgically. HR has to reform surgically in terms of new talent pipelines. And the best example is Israel, which has taken the startup culture to an extremely new high. And once again, a remarkable example of civil military fusion. Now in Israel, the role of reservists was already, played a major role in Israel emerging as this technology superpower, because the way the reservist system works there. So every week, say somebody, a professor in the best university comes back to do a week of patrolling. Somebody who's a top guy in business comes back to sail for a week, and so on and so forth. So what the military needs and what the science can realistically deliver is a given there. And so if you go into the, I mean, there is one book, I forget the author, but the book is titled How Israel Became This Technology Superpower. It tells you in great detail how these things work. But on top of that, they innovated with the startup culture. In fact, the startup culture in Israel has flown out of the military. The first startup was created by the chief of the Israeli Air Force. So it is a very strong combat orientation with this business sense delivery. So once you fuse cutting edge private sector and military practices, they have taken Israel to an entirely new high. And the best example are these three companies, 8200, sorry, one shouldn't call them companies, they're units, 8200, 9300, 81. We know 8200, 9300, 81 is about future technologies. And the way they work is remarkable. Firstly, they provide high-end R&D for Israel. Look at the way they screen talent. They get 1% of Israel's best. So when people are merely graduating out of schools, I'm told there are clandestine recruitment teams working. So if you are the head girl somewhere or the head boy somewhere, you get spotted, you come to 8200. And now look at it. The culture there is that you figure it out yourself. So these young minds actually work on the Stuxnet. They worked on the neutralization of the Israeli reactor. And it couldn't be just from one source. Multiple sources confirm this to you. So it is all about risk taking. But once this culture comes in, and look at exits. You can leave after 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. You want to stick for life, you stick for life. So what people who exit, they go into academia, business, politics, government, Silicon Valley. It creates this elite network. So there is absence of hierarchy, backing failures, risk taking. They have paid exits. So one particularly bright guy, Barak Perelman, he was helped by the 8200 to create Indegi, which I'm told now is a $400 million company. So look at the whole attitude towards it. How it works in India, I don't know, but look at this. So it is this, and they assert that the technologies of the future will not come from traditional government organizations, but they will come from startups. This is the great faith they have in startups, and this system seems to be working. So it's another example of civil military fusion. And if you thought this was just theory, look at their operational outcomes. In the latest Hamas offensive, driven by capacities in AI, fueled by these three units, you have an advanced AI platform, which is a combination of supercognition, lethality, and sophistication. As I said, created by top-of-the-line cyber and space professionals. So 7 Hamas commanders are taken out through facial recognition techniques. The whole Hamas tunnel network, they do a big data analysis, fuse all intelligence, identify 4 weaknesses, target it, and it is paralyzed in 72 hours. The Alchemist tablet program alerts tank commanders to possible attacks from Hamas PI and the PIJ. I'm told in previous conflicts, the casualties were 200 plus. This time there is 1 casualty. Sergeant Omar Tabib. Now this is what happens when you get innovation into combat. And all these capacities, nothing is at AON stage, nothing is at process. You get sheer delivery and outcomes. China, as the MCF is actually in the ideological moorings of the CCP. It has the blessings of Chairman Xi and is driven and steered personally by the Premier Li Keqiang. Look at this whole thing. They have this global hunt for talent. I'll give you one example. So the brightest Chinese student, Jian V. Pan, is taken, I think, in 2009-10, sent for a PhD under the brightest, best-known name in quantum, Professor Anton Zeliger in Heidelberg University. He has made the quantum satellite, and he's now making the quantum radar. But the Chinese, one thing we have to admire is it a one-off example? No, they studied the military-industrial complex of USA for decades and came up with this option of military academia. And if you see, there are dozens of examples like this. There's a paper that I have read, Hunting for the Phoenix, by some think tank in the West. But it tells you that it is an endeavor for technology, not only technology transfer, knowledge transfer as against technology transfer. And I think from 2008 to 2016, they've opened up recruitment stations in Auckland, Zurich, all of Europe. They got 1,600 of the most talented scientists and others across the globe. And what are they trying to measure up to? They're trying to measure up to the brilliance of the US university system and how they tap talent into their system. By the way, if you just want to know, what happens to talent, I think a couple of years back, if you just Googled, the boss of the DIU in USA was Raj Shah. The lady who headed DARPA was Aarti Prabhakar. So they are actually Indians sitting abroad. For whatever reason, we know all the reasons. We must now find ways, some way to get these people back. Their CMF strategy is also laced with strategic cunning, and this is another thing we need to transit to: strategic cunning, pragmatism, delivery. There's a very interesting example, slightly anecdotal. I'll just take 2 minutes on it. So when the Chinese are looking for their aircraft carrier Liaoning many years back, what do? So they pick up a chap called Xu Zhengping, who's a basketball player from the Guangzhou military region. Now, what does he have to do with Liaoning's acquisition? But this is a true story. They shape him as the critical middleman to get the PLA's the Varyug aircraft carrier, which is in the form of an incomplete hull and blueprints from a Ukrainian shipyard. And it is part of a state and PLA grand plan interception. Now look at the lengths which countries are going to acquire, in technological innovation. And therefore, we must need to step up our game. So Zhu is made to front as a business tycoon who's looking to buy a floating casino in Macau. And to do this, to make it sound real, his image is supplemented. He buys a $30 million villa in Hong Kong, which is funded by the state-owned Huaxia Bank. All the ID is created. He's given millions in bribes. He's given millions to bribe the Ukrainians and keep them liquored up through evenings. In 2 years, he manages to get the carrier, or at least the deal is done. But he's told no, get the blueprints. Another 2 years. And finally, when that carrier travels from Ukraine to Ankara, for some reason it gets stuck. It has to go to Dalia. What happens now? Jiang Zemin flies in, promises the Turks access to Chinese markets, and gets the carrier out. So acquisition cannot be AON, this, that, and the other. That is the nature of the competition is, at least from this example, it lies at the intersect of state deception, funding, commercial fronting, diplomatic maneuvering, and decisive state intervention. Now, I'm not saying that it can be done in India, but we at least have to realize the nature of the game. And if the competition is so stiff, we will have to step up our ambition. And there are other examples. Metamaterials, Riupong Liu gets his PhD from Duke University under the scientist Dave Smith. And in the initial time period, at least they argued that why build labs when you can manipulate and get lab results? So you send a chap there, he gets the lab results of Dave Smith, gives them back to the country. That is how they have built this whole technology ecosystem. Today, PLA has 160 labs across universities, and in a similar manner, PLA powers Huawei. They are enmeshed in all their 5G projects. So little wonder then that 5G. Today, I am told, there's a facial recognition project, there's an autonomous vehicle project in some city, pure civil projects. PLA teams are embedded. Why are they embedded? Because any of those technologies or any of those technologies which will naturally have some military spin-offs, you realize them earlier and you deploy them earlier. As the DG was mentioning, I'm told that they've done a study, and in all emerging domains, they have said 80% of technologies are common. From that, they have identified 284 roadmaps for execution. So this is the way nations are, looking at it. I'll also give an example of, role of comparative ecosystems. And this is a true story. There's a gentleman called Mr. Mukul Sarkar in IT Kanpur. And this also we must see, because unless you have agile bureaucracies, you cannot find equivalence in this game. It is not only about the Chinese stealing IPR. Do they steal IPR? Yes, maybe. But look at all this. So in 2012, Mukul Sarkar and his Chinese compatriot Zi Wang go to IMEC. It's the Inter-University Micro-Electronics Center in Belgium. I'm told it's the best R&D hub for nano and digital technologies. It's some of the best minds in infrastructure. Now, when Zi Wang comes back, he's given full professorship at the Chinese Academy of Sciences, given $1 million, 12 crores at that time grant, and he is when he asks, he says, I cannot do this on my own. I need my fellow Europeans who worked with him. They say, get them. So they are flown in, they are given some subsidized housing. Today, Z Wang heads G Pixel, which I'm told is a $300 million company, and it's an active collaboration with the PLA. Active collaboration with the PLA. So this is the way Zhang stated. What happens to poor Mr. Sarkar? When he comes back to IIT Kanpur, he's put at the bottom of the... Achha, by the way, Z Wang is made full professorship because he's come from the best. Let's see what you do with your talent. Bottom of the rung. He puts up a proposal for R&D proposal for consumables. I'm told, in this business, the micro or whatever those processors get burned, so something, and he asked for some 5 lakhs. That chap is given 12 crores. And on the file, it is said that, these are consumables. We cannot waste our time on tea and biscuits, and the file is returned. And Mr. Sarkar, struggles. He's become a professor last year, and now he's building. By the way, he's building that low light imaging thing now. But see the time lag. So unless you have agile bureaucracies also, it is not merely about technology, and that's why it is about fusion. What will happen with fusion is when talents from various domains come together, these siloed bureaucracies will disappear. They will automatically disappear. But if you have these siloed bureaucrats, I'm sure that whoever that bureaucrat was, he was doing it with the best of intent. He actually didn't want money to be spent on tea and biscuits. He didn't realize that they were being spent on micropress, whatever that chip business is. And look at this. Why are the Chinese foolish to say that get your European friends? They are aiming at knowledge transfer, not technology transfer. Technology transfer is blueprint, which we keep looking at. From that blueprint, you will never get the technologies of the future. Knowledge transfer. People who have worked on it, get them. So these, if you study the deeper nuances of these two to three countries, and look at this now. We've all heard of, Z cracking down on Jack Ma and his cohorts, DD and all that, all those internet tabs. There may be a logic to that because they are a threat to the political system and all. But concurrently, look at the resolve, even ruthlessness to stay ahead in the strategic technological competition. So they are attempting to reshape the IPO pipeline to fit a new strategic vision. And what is that strategic vision? To make China the global center for high-tech innovation. And how? They are expanding, the state is expanding its presence up and down the IPO pipeline. Now, I'm told over the last 8 years, they have put in $900 billion into this IPO pipeline with the purpose of getting products for high-end national security. And early funding flows, focused at biotech, renewables, AI, programmable materials, precision equipment, and key core technologies that guarantee national economic security and national defense security. And Z is saying that, don't waste your time on internet companies, but on those companies that give us microchips, quantum computing, genetics, BCI, brain-computer interface, technologies of the future. And the message to investors is clear, that change your business model towards high-tech in the national security space if you want to get funding. So look at the whole sophistication in this. It's not merely of minds coming together or breaking down silos. It is looking so far ahead. Civil-military fusion is a means to win, to be a lead in the strategic competition and so on and so forth. My last example is Turkey. That's the last stop. Look at Turkey's transition from somewhat of a middling power to this drone superpower. I didn't know. Now, this has also been carefully calibrated. It was enabled by CMF of a Turkish kind. I would say not very sophisticated, but uniquely Turkish. It is the consequence of something called the Turkey Technology Board, the armed forces, the scientific community, and the business coming together. So I'm told in 2004, Saluk Bayraktar, this Bayraktar drone, he's doing his master's in MIT. And look at the topic of his subject. It is dictated by the Turkish Technology Board. Aggressive leveraging of unmanned systems. I can guarantee you that not a single PhD in India would be doing it on such a kind. It's just not done. Aggressive maneuvering of unmanned systems. It'll certainly not be done. It is done, and I don't know whether it was actually crafted. I haven't found evidence, but there could be some linkages. Why does he go and do it like that? And he comes back, and there is resolute synergetic follow-through of the whole program with everybody coming together. And it is manifested in this Bayraktar TB2, which is game-changing. You have now President Erdogan asserting that these drones have given Turkey power projection capacities to eliminate inimical threats at source. And that's why Turkey is described as a drone superpower. So technological prowess is embedded into statecraft. And now we see, we were skeptical initially, but this drone has done wonderfully well successively. Syria, Libya, Nagorno-Karabakh, and now Ukraine. It has contributed to Turkey's strategic heft. And now I'm told they also earn very smart revenue. They leverage it as war as a service. So any country in trouble, here is our drone, here is our EW system, and you get revenues. So it's about this whole cunning, pragmatism, delivery, staying ahead in this technological game. And they are now building a futuristic unmanned combat vehicle, the UCV-MIUS. I don't know how viable it is. Anil will comment on that. But it threatens to replace the 5th generation aircraft. It's got similar attributes in terms of supersonic speed, stealth capability, payload. And a C-enabled version, if media reports are to be believed, was tested very successfully recently. And I'm told Pakistan has done it. So this is, how, things are happening. Now, where do we stand? I would say that the foundational metrics are changing. There is no doubt that the instrument of force is much more central in our strategic outlook today. We've set new normals, Balakot, Kailash. Defense is coming out of the shadows of foreign policy. And when I look back at my 30, 40 years, it's a marked change. It was not the case before. This is a very big change. If you actually ask me, the CDS DMA was path-breaking. It was more powerful than Barry Goldwater Nichols. It empowered the defense services to think, articulate, design, and drive change through the national security system. It was not merely about CDS. And if we reflect very carefully, our delivery has been suboptimal, to say, in terms of driving change, and therefore we need to take this whole business very seriously. And CMF may be just one of the metrics. We've seen far greater convergence in foreign policy, greater concert between force and diplomacy. If you see the fine print of the readouts of the 2+2 mechanisms, Quad, there are huge strategic and technological opportunities there, huge. But we will not be able to tap them unless we transform our domestic technological ecosystem in terms of civil military fusion. Now, if you're playing this game, say with Japan, with USA in the Quad, unless you have an ecosystem which is even operating in that bandwidth, how will you ever deliver? And therefore, this is so important. India's policies, procedures, and postures to business and enterprise have undergone a monumental change from what I quoted. Those days business was viewed with suspicion, control, throttling, and the skills you needed were network, connection, persuasion, perhaps kickbacks. Today, you have new metrics: efficiency, capability, market share, quality. The new mantra, I'm told, is Shri companies, sustainable, honest enterprises. I believe Mr. Tata made a comment on some company, I think it was the Ambujas. He said they are Marwadis, but they are honest and they are efficient. So the Marwadis, with due apologies, he's no longer merely cunning. He's honest and efficient. This is a compliment coming from Mr. Tata. And there's this extraordinary story of Ambuja, ordinary men creating an extraordinary company. We have Flipkart, Big Basket. So the attitudes and DNA of entrepreneurship are changing. But now I'll tell you where the challenges lies in the startup ecosystem. The defense startup ecosystems have also started doing well. Recently, the MOD under the Defense Secretary have placed orders of 380 crores, 50 crores each to 3 startups. Huge change. The army itself, and I think courtesy General Mohanty, we've given orders of 300 crores merely in the drone domain. Samir Joshi and somebody and somebody and somebody. So all this has started happening. But if you see the larger boom in the civilian space in the startup, they are becoming unicorns. Defense is not, it has to ride the larger acceleration, because if it doesn't do that, it will peter out. Right? There is a danger of it petering. And therefore, this is the time to pump IDEX with more energy, step up that game, and all that can come, with this whole concept. Civil military fusion is not about structural merging. It is about a merging of thought and mind space, which basically is, we need to, be a player in the hardball. We need to win the strategic competition. We need to innovate. If talent comes this way, so be it. Or if this is the changes we need to do, so be it. This Honorable Prime Minister has made some these urgings. The Raksha Mantri has made similar calls. Today, I don't know if you agree with me, the political vision, strategic directions are clear. It is the next level of bureaucracy which has to step up, A big change from our cribs of the past. And as I said, we've seen some very great initiatives in MOD, IDEX 380 crores, in things like AI-based analysis of satellite imagery, counter drones, see-through armor, Atmanirbharta. As I said, it's not merely, in fact, self-reliance will not come unless you have self-belief. The self-belief that you can build technologies in the future. And that will not happen unless you have the civil-military fusion. I gave the example of, what the Indian Army has done. I can tell you very quickly, just 1 minute, about some of the projects in ARTRAC, which worked very well. So Bharat Forge has opened this technology development and turning center at MCME Secunderabad. Tech Mahindra has come up with a similar initiative at CME Pune. We've signed MOUs with a host of IITs, IIMs, MIT Pune, MIT, RRU. We are looking for this academic collaboration. We've had many successes in IIT, Samir Joshi, Harsha Holosuit. There are startups which are working on the Indian version of the Bayraktar, drone swarms, robotics, precisionry, low light imaging, EOIR, semiconductor. None of this is theory. Very ambitious projects, but they need to be infused with this whole spirit of civil military fusion so that we can take it. Mr. Baba Kalyani, of course, is a legend in terms of defense entrepreneurship. ARTRAC itself spent about 150 crores last year for R&D. And so, this can be stepped up. So what are the initiatives for the future? I'll just wind up in 2 to 3 minutes. As I said, we must step up our ambitions and now focus on deep tech. So look at Elon Musk. When his friends were thinking of how to make money from the internet, he was looking at launching a rocket company. I mean, he must have been mad, but he did it. Those are the kind of ambitions which will come from this ecosystem. I told you about the DIU. The DIU worries have led to the Army Force Futures Command. So we must also look at similar. Do we need to take these innovations straight to the field? Or do we need to plow them to this bureaucratic system? I mean, both may have their advantages or disadvantages, but we need to consider all this. Defense startups. I mean, if Israel is an example, see the road that we have to travel. In our asymmetric addressal of China, and here I would like to consider this. Look at USA, $750 billion, China's defense budget, $215 billion. So the budget differential is similar, but China, with all these innovations, with this restructuring, organization, technological ambition, whatever it has done, is creating displacement anxiety in the Americans. So the point I'm making is that, of course, should we enhance our defense budgets? Of course, where the needs are legitimate, but asymmetric addressal is also a possibility. And it can be done by all these smart changes. Civil military fusion will be a useful metric. Of course, it has to be accompanied by a whole lot of organizational restructuring. And I think this point has been driven home once again in Ukraine, where it does seem that small and agile technologies are challenging traditional legacy systems. Precisionary and surveillance are challenging fire and maneuver. I mean, see, there's no problem with the tank, but if you don't upgrade the tank, you make the poor tank a 20th century platform struggling to fight a 21st century battle. You have to upgrade it with all this innovation and all this kind. After Ukraine, also, there are huge opportunities in defense. I mean, there's no doubt that countries will step up defense expenditure. So those of us who are national security agnostic, but even from the commercial standpoint, we must do all this. If we have to get revenues for our country, make in India, or this and one of the things that we have to do, I think, is, especially in technology, is a white space in India, technology and national security, because unless there is thought leadership of this kind, where you study these systems like the Chinese did, thousands planned just didn't come up. Decade-long study of that American university system, what it did to its talents, and then they come up with the response. So we need some kind of, deep thought leadership in this domain. Multidisciplinary research has to be the future. Look at, say, Stanford, Hoover Institution. So the best minds are there. James Mattis, H.R. McMaster, economists, Condoleezza Rice. What does it do to that whole ecosystem? So multidisciplinary research. Why can't we have a robust national security think tank in JNU? I don't know whether the idea will even be considered, but that's what Stewart and Stanford and Hoover are. Or a MOD or a services tie-up in deep tech with Indian Institute of Science. Everybody else seems to be doing it now. More security studies programs in IIT. The MIT has so many security studies programs. If you don't like the Americans, look at the Israeli model, look at the Turkish model, or create a model of your own. Create but one which is forward-looking. So in sum, today's discourse was, it was about civil-military fusion, but it was also a persuasion to fortify the foundations of Indian power. Civil-military fusion may be the right metric, the right instrument to further embellish Indian power. In my view, India is in a geopolitical sweet spot. It is indeed the toast of the world in every sense. Everybody seems to be wooing us. Civil-military fusion will enable and possibly hasten our rise to our place and promise in the world. And I must end with this quote from Guru Tegh Bahadur, and this is remarkable. He says, Bal hoye, bandhan chhoote, sab kuch lage upaye. When strength accrues, shackles snap, every move that you make seems a stratagem. This is so true of China. वो कुछ भी करता है, the world wonders. So if you get power, so CMF is an instrument to strengthen the foundations of your power, because true power speaks softly, it has no reason to shout. I think I've said enough. I've advanced all the possible arguments in the service of civil-military fusion, because I think that is a conviction with me. But now we'll hear the discussants and any contrary views. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, General Raj Shukla. We have heard a number of useful points from you, but I particularly got the impression that the discourse in India, and I want the others, Mr. Sanjay, Mitra and General Mohanty, to comment on this, that we have kind of limited ourselves to civil-military relations so far. We need to move to the next stage, civil-military fusion, in the broadest possible sense as brought out by General Raj Shukla, and it will require a change in mindsets. It will require a change in the not just the structure and resources, but also mindsets, as you very aptly put it. I think no country can afford to sit on its laurels and be complacent. Not even the United States of America, known for its formidable innovation capabilities. And as we have seen over the last 2 years, they have passed the US Competition and Innovation Act 2021, America Competes Act of 2022. And they've done this in the full knowledge that the competition is not sitting idle, particularly the People's Republic of China. So we've really got to pull up our socks and have a go at it. And I do hope that we will get there. I now request the first discussant, Mr. Sanjay Mitra, to kindly take the floor and share his views. If you can limit yourself to about 10 minutes, I'll be very grateful, because we are running out of time, and I do want some time left for not just the discussants, there are 3 in all, but also some questions from the floor. No doubt there will be many questions. Over to you, Mr. Sanjay Mitra.
Thank you very much. I must thank IDSA, the DG, and my biggest compliments to General Raj Shukla for a really illuminating talk. It has left me overwhelmed, and I am really, in a kind of still assimilating all the thoughts that have been kind of propounded there. This had a problem. On a lighter note, I wish I had met General Shukla many, many years ago, because in a typical Bengali household, the divorce between Lakshmi and Saraswati was almost always total. I wish I had met him earlier. Then maybe, I could have kind of done better for myself. The basic issue in civil-military fusion is that it's a great idea. But I think it is somewhat still in future. Let's start with small things. Let's start with services integration. Let's start with civil-military integration. And let's talk about civil-military fusion. By the way, civil-military fusion, does it always presuppose a close organic link between the army and the party? Does it closely presuppose ideological linkages? These are issues that should not be brushed on the carpet, and just merely saying China has done this or China has done that is not going to help us. I only say that let us start small. Let us give the procurement of the major equipment and ideas to the armed forces. Currently, that is with the Ministry of Defense. Let's start like that. That will be the real integration. Because as and when the armed forces are given the task of procuring platforms or systems or equipment or ideas, that is when they're going to drive and seek excellence. Currently, this diffuse responsibility, we are back in the same place where we were. So let us start small. Then maybe we go ahead to jointness, then we go ahead to theaterization, then we talk of civil-military integration. Because the biggest buy-in at this point is from the political class. Now, the political class will be right in saying, please do what we told you to do. We told you to have jointness. Please show and evince jointness. Please show and evince, integration. So in this sense, I think it's a great idea, civil-military fusion, and we need to see, but we need to take step by step, and it's going to be long and arduous process, and there are no ready-made solutions. The biggest difference between us and the China and the US is the amount of money they can throw at this. China saw double-digit growth of military expenditure and R&D, defense R&D, for a period of about 20 years starting to 1997. We are quite far away. We are aspirational. We want to go there, but we were quite far away from that. So the big thing is that do we have enough money to do this? So in that perspective, I made the suggestion that start with military procurement should be given to the armed forces so that they can drive better this process of synergizing. After all, you need money to do R&D, you need money to develop, you need money to make prototypes. So that's the way to go. We will have to live with AON and DAP and such like things like that, unless we're looking for the fusion of the kind China has. That's a call that will be taken by everybody together, put together. But I think we'll have to live with, unfortunately, the CAG and the AON and the DAP for some time to come to really manage to get over it. So let's not think that we will be able to get rid of all these issues. So in my opinion, so this is pretty much all I have to say. And I would again like to say that this is an idea that we need to think about, but we need to go step by step and process in steps and not take a giant leap forward and end up, not doing anything in particular. Thank you very much. I have a hard stop. I need to go. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sanjay Mitra, for joining us and for sharing your valuable thoughts. You've also conceded some time, which I'm happy to offer to the following discussants in case they have a few more points to make. So at this stage, I invite General CP Mohanty to kindly share his thoughts with us.
Thank you, Ambassador Chinoy, General Raj Shukla, Mr. Sanjay Mitra, and General Bipin Bakshi, along with AVM Bolani. I think stage has been set by General Raj Shukla when it covered a greater context. And some thoughts have also been shared by our previous Defense Secretary, that is Mr. Sanjay Mitra. So, in fact, it was a very interesting reading. The 2012 paper authored by my colleague Raj Shukla, I picked up some very good points from that. Now, I would like to take you into a different domain. That domain is of behavioral sciences. We've talked about the entire global scene, but let me just focus on to the Indian scene and offer you very simple solutions to where the main problem lies as far as the civil-military fusion is concerned in India. Now, when we look at, there have been many seminars, studies. There has been not much of a progress, other than few exceptions which General Raj Shukla talked about, like indigenization has been one major progress that we've made. Coming on to the civil-military liaison, we started off with a word called liaison. From liaison, we graduated to cooperation, from there on to fusion. Now, where is the word integration? That is what is not happening. I haven't heard something like, say, IAS, IPS integration, or any conferences or judiciary bureaucracy conferences or police judiciary conferences. Then why is it that military and civil, we are looking at completely two domains, which I would say are the instruments of comprehensive national power, but we have common goals. But despite being cogs of the same wheel, we do not look at things in a common manner. I would like to analyze this from behavioral sciences,
relating to human psychology, and also which relate to the organizational behavior when we start looking at interactions with each other. I will recommend very simple solutions which are implementable without changes to our basic organizational structure at every level. I want to recommend to you from what needs to be done to how it needs to be done, right from the bottom going up to the top. When we look at the separation of the entities, that is something we have inherited, which has been created by the perception. Now, this inheritance of the perception starts with the colonial past, wherein there were limited resources. There was a great divide between the ICs, the British Indian Army, Royal Indian Air Force, and Royal Indian Navy. There were limited interactions and also limited resources. Immediately on independence, they started a race for the perks, privileges, powers. There was also apprehension of military coups. Why military coups? Because that was the time in the neighborhood and also in the region. There were Ayub Khans, Suharto, military junta of Myanmar, and there was also subsequently coup in Bangladesh. Then there were apprehensions in the leadership that whether army should be given more power than what they have. That being so, the Indian armed forces, we must understand at least in our nation, is definitely not a deep state like many of our neighboring nations. Uh, However, what is there is the unawareness of the way of functioning of the military by our civil counterparts. There is a lack of mutual trust that exists, which creates the divide and difference of opinion on the security matters, which necessarily not lies in the domain of the military. I would like to bring it up into three stages of our upbringing. That is the birth and the upbringing, the social standing itself, the family background, the education system that is early, the training in the respective institutions and our respective spheres, the organizational culture that gets added up of all these upbringing, which is created by the collective human perceptions which gets strengthened due to the sometimes the positive spiraling effect or the negative spiraling effect. Another impact thing that impacts on our organizational behavior is the local impact. That is the attitude of the senior leadership of the civil and the military, whether the interpersonal relations are positive or negative. There is also an interplay of ego onto that, which lead to undue emphasis on the protocol, and that leads to dissonance or the consonance of the views. A near similar situation is also existing in our inter-service interactions, despite common training institutions such as NDA, Staff College, Higher Command, SDMC, and NDC. It's a typecasting of the image that remains very deeply embedded into our psyche. Something like, we look at the army as the pongos, and the navy as the dopes, and the air force as the flamboyant flyboys, and civilians as something which is completely different from what is our comprehension. The typecasting of the image is also creating, as far as stubborn attitude, when you're looking at the defense services, arrogant, rigid, and who are resistant to change. They are living in protected environment. They're quite mysterious. In fact, if you see our language, our vocabulary also quite different from our counterparts in civil. So that's again something that creates that kind of apprehension whether we are able to talk in the same language, despite the fact we all talk in English. Now, armed forces, when we look at ourselves, we somehow see as the last bastion. Indeed, we might be the last bastions, but we are not necessarily the only patriots in the nation. We are not aware most of the time of the challenges that are faced by our counterparts in the civil services, that they have accountability to the population, the elected representatives of the people, the judiciary, and also they have to look after the financial aspects, maximum governance with minimum resources. They're also constantly on the public glare, which you have been hearing from time to time. Now, if you recall, the Union War Book which is supposed to be the Bible and the Gita of everything as far as the war is concerned, it has only been invoked during the all-out wars. Even during Op Parakram and Op Vijay, that was not invoked. That's the reason. Even the military was not mostly aware of what the role that was being played by our counterparts in civil administration, industry, and elsewhere. So let's talk about the first stage, that is the upbringing. Now, the upbringing is the start of the value system, the emergence of the value system. A number of us come from the families which have got representatives in bureaucracy, technocrats, professionals from multiple fields, including of the defense forces. However, there are also exceptions in many of the states, like my own state. Basic mutual respect is there. Basic understanding is there. So that is very positive start. But what happens is the stage 2 when we go into the education systems. In the education system, the major problem lies, in my opinion, is the lack of basic military training, because we do not have major awareness that is created, except for an NCC. That is where the problem lies. There is no conscription in our nation. So there is a basic lack of knowing about what our armed forces are all about. The social sciences don't talk anything about the armed forces. So there definitely is a need for basic school education, which should include under social studies about the organizational structure, arms, services, the rank structure basically, knowledge of the weapon systems, aircrafts, ships, and equipment, etc. That's something which is not there. So that is where the unawareness happens, and that is where it makes the armed forces mysterious in the eyes of others. While the nation is revamping the education system, isn't there a need to also introduce this particular practice through the indulgence of Ministry of Education, the DOPT, and the MOD, which is definitely implementable? Now, talking about our rank structures, within our nation itself, all the tri-services, our rank structures are quite complex. The equivalence and the ranks that we have are entirely different in all the three services. Is there a case in point to have a commonality of the ranks as in many other nations? That's something which requires a change in the major organizational structure. That is for something which may recommend to be implemented in due course of time. Now I come on to the stage 3, that is our basic training when we become specialists in respective fields. I'm talking about the tri-services, I'm talking about the bureaucratic service, bureaucracy, as also the technocrats. Now let's talk about the IAS Academy, that is Lal Bahadur Shastri National Academy in Mussoorie, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel Police Academy, Hyderabad, the CAPF Officers Institutes in Gurgaon, Mount Abu, etc. There is definitely a requirement of basic military awareness. These capsules can be conducted by sending teams from the defense training institutions. The national security capsules are there, but they do not address the basic requirements. So therefore, there is a lack of basic understanding. If your baseline is not strong, how do you build up onto that? National security capsules are not adequate as of today. Now, all that is required is just 1 week capsule, which can be conducted by their counterparts from the military. Similarly, we can have the training about the civil services in NDA, IMA, the Naval Academy, and the Air Force Academy, which need to have awareness capsules similarly by team of officers from these civil services training institutions. Once again, it could be for about 1 week. And even similarly, adequate literature can be given, which can be referred to in due course of time. Now, yet another field where there is complete void is the social interactions between these academies, which is very possible. Mussoorie, Dehradun, we have IMA, we have the IS Academy. There is hardly any breaking of the ice between these two institutions. When we come to South India, let's talk about the Police Academy. They can also interact with the Cadets Training Wing in Hyderabad, the Air Force Academy, Naval Academy, Azimala, and the Police Academy itself. So all this integration can take place at that moment. This will create a very robust understanding of each other's points of view. Yet another recommendation that I'll make is the conductor tours, which also can help in building bridges between all the services. Today, we have systems of army attachment, but it is not across the board for all the services. This is semi-structured. This is not something that is given to the formations. So it is up to the initiative of the formation commanders how they want to structure these forward area tours by the youngsters from the civil services. It does not build up the basic knowledge, and it is not yet mostly institutionalized. So similarly, the courses that we have in Staff College and NDC are too late and in fact too less in content, which can facilitate building up the bridge again. Now we look at, after having talked about the training, I'll say a few words about the organizational interactions. At the formation level, below the services headquarter and the ministry, this is essentially based on necessity and it is temporary in nature. Other than recruitment, the counterinsurgency and counter-terrorist operations, aid to civil authorities, and HADR missions, there is hardly any interaction with the civil counterparts. These are mostly transactional relationships, wherein there lies a relationship of that being a client and a service provider. It is one up and one down. We talked about the land security cantonment, VIP visit coordination, etc. And now that is incident based. So therefore, there is a complete lack of common goals. Now, we sometimes are perceived as central government forces, and the state administration have their own challenges, have their own priorities. So therefore, there is a dissonance there too. The CMLCs, the Civil Military Liaison Conferences, is one such example. There's a lot of energy and effort that is spent in administration by coordinating the protocols, and the seating plan itself. Thereafter, as a result, the outcome is mostly suboptimal. When we come to the unified command in those states where there is institutional mechanism of interaction, particularly in Assam, Northeast, Jammu and Kashmir, that is a success story. There are common goals of security and not merely of the law and order. We are treated as partners and not client service provider relationship. The strategic groups and the operational groups meetings are very fruitful and mostly they're conducive. The protocols and the organizational structures are well ironed out, and relations is that of the equals. There is the lack of awareness of the local customs, language, and all this is bridged by their interaction with the civil administration, who come in very forthright in assisting the forces which are there only for short periods of time. When we come onto the service headquarters, the ministry, that is where we have a full-scale interaction. This is where the major problem lies. It becomes the most complex. And while the major decisions are within the domain of civil and political and bureaucratic hierarchy, the military leadership primarily is left to only making recommendations, which are often questioned. So the one book that clearly puts across all these points is, I just happened to read it, is Absent Dialogue by Amit Mukherjee, which makes an interesting reading. It calls the civil-military relations in India as dysfunctional equilibrium. How true. Most of the time in our interactions, the perceptions precedes the speech. It's something like, I have to defend my point. I just wait so that other can complete his statement so that I can put across my point. We are hardly listening to each other. That's where the communication failure takes place. It is more of a control and less of a coordination. So why is that? Can that be addressed? Yes, we can build bridges. The services officers who get posted to the service headquarters, we have shorter tenures and very less institutional memory. But when it comes to the level of the directors and below, they have reasonably long tenures and experience. I'm talking about the civil counterparts of ours. The senior officers who come from the other ministries hit the ground running and are bound by the rule books which are quoted by the staff who have the repository of the files and the institutional memory. So therefore, there is a complete lack of understanding of military technologies, the terminologies, the abbreviation, technical jargons that are very commonly used by all of us, and which most of the time become incomprehensible and not adequately understand. So what are the solutions? The solutions at the headquarters or the ministry levels are that we need to talk more often. We need to overcome the protocol barriers, walk up to each other's office and talk more informally. And any one of us who says that there is no time, I dare say there is adequate time for these interactions, because ultimately they save on the time. We should have structured short training capsules for the officers who are immediately posted to the service headquarters. This could be up to brigadier and below, 1 week for each of these such groups. And similarly for the senior officers, since the time is at premium, 1 to 2 days capsule is adequate. Now, what should be covered in the capsule is essentially the organization of our civil counterpart, the ministry, who does what are the roles that they play. And similarly, this could be done under the aegis of the headquarter IDS. And similar capsule can also be undertaken by the headquarter IDS for the civilian senior officers who come from the other ministries. And what is important is our social interactions, which other than the senior levels almost lacks. And there is also a tendency to flock together, talking to only the uniform fraternity, sometime within service, leave alone the tri-services. And there is a need for us to intermingle. Now, when we come on to the conduct of various formal meetings with the ministries, what lacks is the preliminary discussions. It's just the matter of files being thrown between one place to another. One has participated in a large number of such boards like the service procurement boards, the defense procurement boards, the DSCs. What we find that there is no briefing or the cross briefing which can be carried out on an informal manner between the ministry officials and the services themselves. There has to be exchange of ideas, because most of these meetings are formal in nature, which are minuted. So therefore, until unless we clear the perceptions of each other, we clarify the minds, we come to a common goal. Once the note of dissent is made, there is no way it is going to come up again for discussion in couple of months to come. So therefore, there is more need of us to interact at every level. It does take a lot of time to resolve. So these kind of preliminary briefings, which is between the branches, that can really bring in rich dividends. Yet another thing about the human psychology is our own seating arrangement. It's like a bilateral meeting. One side are the uniform fraternity, other side are the ministry officials. I mean, there is a need of us to really intermingle in that. It cannot be discuss and counter and discuss. This is not the way a meeting needs to be held. The only way we can resolve issues more amicably is by sitting in a manner which is more informal. It is something like when somebody comes to your office, when he sits across the table, it's a client service provider relationship. When you sit on the couch, you are more informal. I do agree with Mr. Sanjay Mitra when he talked about the procurements of the armed forces being given to the armed forces. I wish that happens. It'll be a very positive step. Yet another point. Of cross-staffing. While the make an impact, there is always a hesitation in senior is largely from the other than the service. Because of primarily the awareness or the lack of awareness of the appraisal systems and the apprehensions in the way of functioning and the fear of being isolated in that organization in which you are an outsider. The work is different, primarily when it comes to each of the organizations. So, while working under the civilian officers or military officers, the awareness and the apprehensions will definitely improve the effectiveness if it is done. We have very positive steps, made good progress in interfacing of the DRDO, wherein the DRDO officials have been sent to the field formations. The DRDO officers have been going and addressing our training institutions, and there's regular interaction between services and DRDO. That's where making very positive interactions. So that's something which can be carried forward to other places also. And need-based inventions. What we've been advising the DRDO that please consult us on what we require before you start producing any, before you start manufacturing or designing any new technology. So that's something which has now started happening, and it's also a good model of integration when it comes to the Army Design Bureau. Similar arrangements are also there in the other two services. When they're integrating adequately with the SIDM, the FICI, the CII, the academia, industries, DRDO, and that's where a positive strides are being made as far as the indigenization is concerned. And this is also something similar to the PPP model that we talked about. One more suggestion that I would like to give is that we have got very good interaction within the various think tanks that we have, the IDSA, clause, CAP, sensors, etc. Now, the recommendations that are coming from these institutions need to be implemented and implementable and implemented. This needs to they need to reach the decision makers. We've just had a corporatization of the OAB. This is where the cross-staffing is not taking place. We have many opportunities where the cross-staffing at the highest level, I'm talking about the JS and above level, that is where the best interaction has to take place, because this is where the decisions are taken, not at the low level. Yet another thing is the issue of the decisions being time bound. Instead of throwing files up and down, instead of questioning things through paper, there is more need of sitting together, finding solutions and working towards the fructification of each project on a definite timely, time-bound manner. Even the queries and the counter queries can be resolved by sitting across the table and reducing on the time frame that are taken in taking decisions. I have interacted with many other ministries. I found that somewhere there is a long way to go as far as we are concerned as Tri-Services Organization, and despite being the IHQ of MOD, there has got to be much more integration in that. I would like to finish this this session by saying that although the military leadership or the defense services are the most trusted institutions, the leadership needs to be trusted, and what we need while it is being projected, there is a need for the necessity to be accepted by our colleagues in the civil. Thank you.
Thank you very much, General Mohanty. You have actually also struck all the right notes, and may I also say that you have been brutally frank. I mean, taking us to behavioral sciences in order to address civil-military fusion, in this case, of course, civil-military relations, for you dwelt more on that theme. But you did kind of disassemble it for us in a manner in which we can actually relate to it. And I was struck by the terms that you use: the absence of trust, organizational behavior, the ingrained outlook that we develop when we belong to certain, organizations. Words such as stubborn, arrogant, resistant to change. Of course, this is applicable across the board to both the military and the civilian structures. But let me say that Labasna, since you referred to it, and I am traveling to Labasna in a short while, and I believe General Raj Shukla will also be there in another day or so, is currently conducting a civil military training module. It's a joint module, and there are 48 officers there from the civil services and the military being trained together, being exposed to precisely the kind of stuff that you mentioned. And I speak with utmost humility when I say that the Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis is a very fine example of precisely that kind of fusion or dialogue that is so much necessary. And here it is that we actually do break down the silos, and you have experienced that yourself and commended the Institute in your remarks. Your comments have also been extremely well received, just as the keynote speaker's remarks were. I now turn to Air Vice Marshal Anil Golani, the ADG CAPS, to give us a bird's eye view, if I may use that term, or a kind of overall perspective from a certain dispassionate altitude. Thank you.
Thank you, Shri Sujan Chinoy, for giving me this opportunity to speak, and Bipin Bakshi for calling me over. I think it was a pleasure listening to Raj Shukla, and we, of course, go back a long way, more than 40 years to the academy days. And I must admit that I was not prepared to give this talk, so whatever I speak comes from the heart, and it is Dil Se. You know, my perception, views personal, of course, that we have created these silos. When I say silos, these silos, Ambassador Chinoy brought out, it is within the armed forces and between the armed forces and the bureaucracy as well, whether that is civil bureaucracy or the foreign services. And I will explain this with a couple of examples, And in 1965, when the Indo-Pak war took place, I think the final civil servant of that time, who was the Defense Secretary, PVR Rao, I think the political decision was taken not to attack the airfield in East Pakistan, which led to the Indian Air Force losing a lot of their aircraft on the ground, forcing it into a dubious defensive strategy. And also, we were not permitted to attack Peshawar till 13th of September. And it is from Peshawar that the Pakistan Air Force launched the attack, carrying out an attack over Pathankot airfield. When this civil services bureaucrat PVR Rao wrote to the army chief conveying the prime minister's authorization that the armed forces were free to choose their place and time of attack, to attack at their place and time of choosing. This was on 25th of August when the thing at J&K had started. This decision was not conveyed to the Air Force chief, who learnt about it 10 days later, and similarly not to the naval chief and not to the chairman chiefs of staff committee. So this is where we were at that time when, ultimately we won the war, but maybe this capitulation probably could have occurred much earlier and at a lesser cost. It happened during the recent Kargil conflict also, when the decision to use air power was taken much later and they were on it. Second example, personal. I was undergoing the NDC, which is the RCDS abroad in London, and I decided to make an official or a formal call on to the High Commissioner at London, and I will tell you the reason why. I thought that when we are talking about international security and strategy, it has to be a fusion between the uh, people in uniform as well as the the Foreign Service and what India is doing and how it is viewed in the UK over there. And to my surprise, the High Commissioner was surprised as to what I'm doing there, learning about security and strategy. Subsequent to that, like the NDC here, the RCDS also comes on tours. They come on a tour to South Asia, and I organized a talk by the High Commissioner for the officers of RCDS who comprise of other countries who were coming on a visit to India, Pakistan, and this region, and a wonderful talk the High Commissioner gave. But this was something which hitherto was absent. It was not happening in there. So this is what I, we can talk a lot, but unless this fusion of minds takes place and we want to achieve a common goal, and I think Raj Shukla mentioned this term of agile bureaucracy is something that we are looking at, and not having an officer from the railways, one day suddenly posted to the Ministry of Defense and spends 2 years there, or from a state cadre. I think there is enough which has been written or said about it. We talked of China's example of scholars going abroad, studying and coming back to India. If our institutions are so good, then we should be having people from abroad coming and learning international security and strategy in our institutions, and thereafter helping their own nations grow. Why can't we send 10, 15 officers, whether from the civil services? They do go, of course, from the services abroad to Harvard, Stanford, and all these institutions. Make them get back, and then be there in this think tanks. I appreciate the example of MP-IDSA as a think tank where this fusion takes place across the civil services, bureaucracy, and the army. Why doesn't it take place in the real world is the question that we need to ask. And a couple of more live examples. We talked of flexible use of airspace. The Air Force, I think some 38, 39 airfields. I think ACS AD is here, if you'll bear with me. The Air Force has given everything in terms of resources, in terms of space, but what we have got from the Civil Aviation Ministry is nothing. Whether it is manning, whether it is the CFTs, crash fire tenders, it is just give, and give, and there is nothing. So my point is that if we are talking of national interest, then we need to put shoulder to shoulder and work together. We created the Defense Space Agency a couple of years ago. There is a lot that actually should have happened with fusion from the ISRO and Department of Space. Still, there are many question marks over this. So, the last point that I will make is on the representation of the attaches. I think the Air Force today, whether this conflict in Ukraine that took place and whether there is any natural calamity or anything, you will find that we are the first responders. When you look at the representation of the Air Force in terms of attaches, I think these files have been going up and down. In the entire continent of Africa, there is quantity one. And so these are issues where my only submission is that we talk, but when it comes to action, there is very little walking the talk. We talked of the animal spirits of the industry and the startups and entrepreneurs getting unleashed. Yes, but it is too less and too late is what I feel. Unless we take concrete action now in terms of procurement and everything else. I think Defense Secretary mentioned about money. Money cannot buy you everything. I think the jury is still out on the Ukraine-Russia conflict as to who's actually winning the war. But time will only tell where this is going to take us in the future. And that is all that I have to say. I think. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Air Vice Marshal Golani, to this discourse. And I, of course, still get this impression that we need to focus much more on fusion, civil-military fusion, call it military-civil fusion. But we seem to have discussed today, as is the nature of the beast, the absent dialogue, civil-military relations, and in passing, we have also realized that there is an absent dialogue between the three services also. Oddly, that is the truth. We have highlighted protocol issues. General Mohanty also spoke about that. Let me just give you one or two examples from my 4 decades and more of a career on the trot. I came across in one instance a chairman, chiefs of staff committee visiting a particular country, and I was in charge. And the team demanded for him a higher protocol than was otherwise due to a chief. And knowing there is musical chairs on our side, it created enormous protocol issues subsequently for a chief of the same service. For the host country, always then wanted to draw a distinction that if we gave X protocol to your chief when he came here the last time, albeit as chairman, chiefs of staff committee, we certainly cannot give the same to the next one who comes without that badge of additional honor. So we have to think about this, introspect. On another occasion, I was again in charge, and one of our chiefs was visiting in that host country. And when I pulled up at the venue where our chief would be received, my driver kind of nudged me and said, "The host is here." And I looked in the parking lot, and I found a beautifully attired officer step out of a car that he had driven himself into the parking lot, and that was the host chief. And lo and behold, a few minutes later, one of our own chiefs drove up in a very long motorcade. So nothing could have been more starkly, sort of contradictory there. And we need to, therefore, also change with the time. But let me assure you that the Foreign Service that you mentioned in passing is actually best friends with the armed forces. It's always been the case. So let me reassure you on that count. Broadly, when you refer to the civil services, please kindly do issue an exemption certificate for the Foreign Service. Look, we are really at the end of our allocated time, but I'll be remiss in my duty if I did not open it up to comments from the floor. So at this stage, let us have a brief exchange with all the other eminent people who have joined us today. Is there someone who would like to set the ball rolling? General Rakesh Sharma is looking the other way, but before I come to you, may I just request him also to chip in? He has most patiently been listening to all of this, and I'm sure he has something to add.
Thank you, sir. I'm honored. First is this, the word fuse. It means join together, but in Hindi it means fuse, bulb fuse ho gaya. So it sounds like bulb fuse more than the fuse, which means fusion. My issue is small one, and which and great pleasure listening to Raj always, and also to General Mohanty. The point is that are we remiss when we keep blaming the other side? Where are we standing in the course of last 70 years? Have we taken a step forward to brief on the military strategy to the political masters and to the civil bureaucracy? I think we drag the issue so far that we need to know basis. We don't tell anything to the other people. And when there is something comes on your heads, 1999 or 2008 or 2001 or 62, anytime there are political constraints, because last minute when something happens, we go back to the political masters that ये हम करना चाहते हैं. बोलते भाई ये नहीं कर सकते, आपने पहले आज तक तो बताया नहीं था. So are we also the problem creators in everything is not about procurement. Everything is about strategy. The strategy issue, I think the uniformed forces have to pull up their socks also in many ways.
Thank you very much, General Sharma. May I now request you to kindly switch on your mic, if only to ensure that the camera actually focuses on you.
Thank you very much, sir. Firstly, kudos to the
Do
speaker.
please introduce yourself.
Sir, I am Brigadier Bhattacharya. I was. Hello. Hello. Thanks, sir. I am Brigadier, sir, and I've done about 4 years in SIDM earlier, and now I'm heading the northeastern region of CII, sir. So, thank you for inviting me here. And firstly, I must compliment all the speakers for touching upon the entire spectrum of what is, we would say, CMR and CMI and CM fusion, CMF, if we may call it, different from the MCF. Great to listen to all of you, sir. I have one issue with the speed at which things happen. If I may just bring to your notice about the reason why China is hurrying up with its, pushing for the MCF, as they call it. Why is US getting in place this futures command at such a short notice? And look at the time frame from which they have started getting challenged by the innovators and the startups, and how they have converted their entire organizational and institutional mechanism to address the problems. The thing is, be ahead technologically of the competitors. If I look at India, today we are the third largest economy if I'm talking about the PPP side. We are the fifth largest economy in the world if I talk of the GDP side. But we are aspirational. We are aspirational in a very big way. We want to be counted amongst the best and the biggest. At this stage, can we go stepwise? Can we take small steps? Yes, sir. Sir. So can we look at better methods to speed up the whole process rather than remaining laggard in the world of this thing? And it is not that we don't have the capabilities, sir. Today, if I look at the startup environment, today we have crossed 100 unicorns. And if there is not a single one in the sphere of military or defense startups who is in the unicorn category. So obviously there is some issue that needs to be sorted out, the issue that needs to be speeded up. Can we do that? One small question as a corollary is, what do we do to get a vendor culture out and bring a partnership culture in, as far as the military and the civil relations are concerned? Thank you, sir.
Anyone else from the floor by way of a question? At this stage, I request you to kindly restrict yourself to posing a brief question, because then I want to give a quick final word to our speaker and the two discussants. Very quickly, please. Yes.
Sir, I am Group Captain Narang, Drone Federation of India. 2-3 things. For civil and military, you need a military vertical and a civil vertical for fusion. Lot of civil capabilities depend on civil verticals. So in aviation, we do not have the civil technology development vertical. So that's a one gap. Second is the R&D setup. If we do not have a R&D setup in the civil aviation. And the third is sensitization of the stakeholders. And the fourth, I would like to ask Raj Shukla, sir, what is the way forward? You have described the China's entire ecosystem and the procedures. What are the implementable actions which India can do? Thank you, sir.
I'm Anil Kananga, former professor in Indian Institute of Foreign Trade. I have a direct question to Lieutenant General Raj Shukla. You mentioned about breaking the silos actually among the bureaucracy and the central governments. But I understand when you want to have a resilient actually fusion, you need to have a coordination of many ministries. It could be Ministry of Defense, it could be Ministry of Home Affairs, it could be Ministry of Science and Technology, it could be Ministry of Telecommunications, it could be Ministry of Information Broadcasting. How do we coordinate this where government has an enormous role to play? That's one. Second is, as the other gentleman mentioned about that India hasn't really witnessed any kind of a startup in defense sector. Is it necessary that India doesn't have much of a private sector coming in there? Is it really about the wealth, or is it something beyond that where we don't have real capacity to actually go for? Because defense startups takes actually, gestation periods are very long. In that way, perhaps private sector is not interested actually to multiply its money immediately, therefore they are not coming forward. What could be the government role there to make this much more encouraging for the private sector to come in? Thank you.
General Shukla, thank you so much, sir, for a lovely lecture. Sir, I'm here to Deswal. So if I just take the gist of your lecture, it is primarily talent fusion with tech. That's what we really discussed. Now, talent finding in India is an issue, and I'm sure companies are finding talent. We can also do in case defense wants to do that. Tech, we are primarily aware as to what we want. So if these two things are being done in a country, how do we in military fuse these two things together?
Thank you very much. So we have totally run out of time now, but not so totally that I don't go back to the panel. Let me start in the reverse order, as in invite Air Marshal Golani. Would you like to say a word or two? Otherwise, I'll move over, sir. Your mic, please. Your mic.
Issue of vendor and the vendor culture. I think every 2 years or 3 years, we find that our defense acquisition procedure continues to change. If I recollect correctly, there was a committee which was set up under one of the IIM Ahmedabad chair, some Sikh gentleman, I forget the name. They had given a host of recommendations as to how to go about acquisitions. The problem in our country is that there's so many committees which take place, reports get submitted. I don't know what happens to them. They just go into the dustbin because like I said, every person who's there at that time thinks that I know best and nobody else knows anything. Then why do we set up these committees? So there is an issue there. If, let's say, a drone chap wants to come, whether he goes to Army, Air Force, Navy, where does he go? We have created these holy cows of DRDO and HAL and these PSUs, and nobody wants to touch the industry with a barge pole, and there are too many issues involved over there. That's all that I have to say.
The question of the procurements. Earlier, some years back, the R&D was entirely within the domain of DRDO. So gradually, the R&D is also being done by several civil industries. Now, what has happened is many of the industries, in fact, General Shukla spoke about many companies which have just, the startups also. They have started investing a lot of money in the R&D, primarily because there are also opportunities for export. And why the civil, I would say the private companies are not willing to invest as much money in the R&D is because there is no guarantee that their R&D is not going to lead to a sunk cost. So there are far too many players in some of the common fields. Some of the common fields could be, looking at the UAVs or the quadcopters. There are far too many players. So when they come on to the procurement, we find it extremely difficult to choose the L1 vendor. So rest of the people are quite disappointed and leads to a lot of allegations, counter allegations, favoritism. So that's the reason we realize that many of the people do get disappointed. Yet another thing is our procurement process itself. It's quite a lengthy document. The process itself is rather complex. There has been endeavor to simplify it, but at the same time, it cannot be simplified further for the time being. So that's the second one. Now, when we talk about the R&D and the DRDO, they have gone for something called as a strategic partnership, wherein they're identifying only 2 vendors. So these 2 vendors are L1 and L2 vendors. So these are the 2 vendors. They have assurance that they are going to get some amount of order, so that R&D itself is not something that they're going to waste their money. So that way it's a very positive step. And I would say that there is definitely a need for investing more and more money by the government into R&D sector by the private players.
Thank you very much. May I now request General Raj Shukla to have the final word?
Yeah, all right. So, in responding, I'll be merely reiterating many of the things that I said. But let me just say, put them in a different manner. The first point is what General Sharma raised. The point is this. I mean, this is something that the defense forces need to answer. That with so much change taking place all around us, and at least change nobody doubts. Everybody is saying there are changes taking place in technology, in strategic systems. Are we constantly going to be the outlier? I mean, that question we have to answer. Okay, if whatever change is proposed, if that is not acceptable to us, for whatever reason, some of them may be legitimate. What other changes have we proposed? Now, this is something that these are serious institutional questions that we'll have to answer. For years, we argued for this, ki bhai MOD mein we have no voice, we have no CDS. DMA was precisely that. And having created CDS, DMA, what have we come up with? This is something that we really have to answer. Also, what are we defending? I mean, and many of that, I'm not doubting anybody's interest. When somebody opposes this change, it is to defend the interest of your soldier, sailor, and airman ultimately. What if I posit to you that all these changes that we resist will harm those very people? Are the consequences of not changing? For example, let's take one, the fact that we didn't integrate, and there can be differences on the structuring of theater commands, but if you don't integrate in the field, my view is that RMA simply bypassed us. Today in modern armies, if a Bradley commander can designate the fire of an aircraft directly, it simply is not possible in our case. I mean, I was a corps commander till four years back, and you still had the CD coming to Alwara and traveling. So these are the questions we seriously need to answer. It's not a matter of the second point. I mean, while I greatly respect what Mr. Mitra said and what General Mohanty said, incremental versus transformative. It has to be transformative. There is no choice. There will be severe consequences for it not being transformative. It will be, if nobody else, just look at what the Chinese are doing. That is real. That is not something altruistic, distant. We see it under our eyes along the WTC, what's happening. So, I mean, those are my two broad responses. Some of the minor issues which came up, like, vendor development part, I agree entirely. So let's say this gun project, for the first time, he was designated as a development partner. And how do you treat him? You treat him like a vendor. It's a mindset change. And if you do not make these incremental changes, and see, I'm from the armed forces, I'm a product of the armed forces. We always prided ourselves in being ahead of thought, in being ahead of everything. Are we going to be the constant laggard? That's my question. And my view is that these are all apprehensions before change. Once that change happens, it will be win-win for everyone. Barry Goldwater Nichols, people say that, I mean, it was very unpopular with the admirals, their marshals and generals, but once it happened, soldiers, sailor, airmen were delighted. We should see the consequences of that. So many of these apprehensions, are those. What can we do specifically? I'll just give you one example. So space and cyber. If we know they are the domains of the future, do we now need to create them in these brick and mortar systems, space command, cyber command? Why can't they do it on the 8200, 89300 model? Smarter, agile, which deliver. And look at, say, the Israeli model. Take any of these. That's why I've given 4 models. There may be more. Take any them and adapt them to yourself. But our response should not be China nahi ho sakta, USA nahi. Why should I copy the Americans? Why should I copy the Turks? और वो भी नहीं हो सकता और हमारा मॉडल क्या है वो भी नहीं करूंगा. I mean, somewhere this is a generational question we'll have to answer. I mean, I can't say it with greater passion. So we just have to change.
And that is what I would like to say. Thank you. Thank you very much once again to all of you. What we really don't want is the French adage that plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. The more things change, the more they remain the same. And we have to really grow out of that. With that, I now invite my colleague, General Bipin Bakshi, the DDG, to kindly deliver the vote of thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, very good afternoon all. I'm sure I speak for all of us who organized it, the discussants, the participants, that we had a very purposeful deliberation on the critical issue which is facing us, that is our national security. And as what the keynote speaker said, we need to fortify the foundations of India's national power. I look back at certain developments which come to my mind, which transformed war and war fighting, the nuclear bomb, the aircraft, and the parachute, being a paratrooper. I'm sure this was not given to the military by the L1 bidder, nor was it procured based on a GSQR, because there was no way you could make a GSQR for something which did not exist. Little wonder even today, our combat freefall parachutes are largely imported. Decades behind the rest of the world, we started making the supply drop parachute at Ordnance Parachute Factory, Hazratpur, and some of the mass drop parachutes are made by OPF Kanpur. Only now, an Indian company is going to provide the combat freefall parachute on TOT from an American company. As we kept improving our parachutes, the design of the best combat freefall parachute kept changing, and we are just playing catch up. So we should not be looking at playing catch up. We should not be borrowing technology. We should leapfrog into innovation. The anti-drone systems is one example. There are many examples where we are doing well, definitely. So Atmanirbharta will hinge on the aggregation, civil-military fusion, but I would say the aggregation of civil, military, industry, and academia. And I hope think tanks are included in the academia. That is the way we will get cutting-edge military technology. And I'll request you to see the movie which has just come out, Tom Cruise. So it starts with him flying an aircraft which is made by the Civil Military Fusion Organization, where he's trying to go hypersonic. And he flies at Mach 10. So this is just to give an idea. So we'll continue to mull over these issues. We should carry out more research into this, more discussions. I do hope some of the other think tanks who are here will also take it forward and look at the issue raised about how to convert vendor to partner. So, well, on behalf of Team MP-IDSA, it is indeed a very proud privilege at this point of time to propose the vote of thanks. At the outset, the keynote speaker, General Shukla, the discussants, the EC members who have taken the time to be with us and to share their thoughts. I'd also like to thank Ambassador Chinoy for conceiving this whole event along with General Shukla, thereafter guiding us in the preparation, and finally to chair the session, which he has done. I am also grateful to the Military Center scholars, Colonel Deepak, Brigadier Page, the organizing team, the conference cell, who has helped to set this up. It marks the first time we have done a hybrid event in this upgraded auditorium. Last but not the least, I'd like to thank all of you, all the participants. We tried to have a very wide cross section. So we have Man from the AB, we have AVM Shivanand from, he's the ACS Ops Air Defense. We have many others. We have NMF CAPS, we have St. George, we have General Mathur sitting here. We also have Brig Indigenization from IDS, a complicated appointment, all three services, various scholars from the institute and from outside. So thank you very much from this, and a very good day.